Hello there, everyone. My name is Jose from the Tulare County Library, and I'm going to be running today's really quick D&D character workshop. Thank you for joining me today. I know it was a little bit of a short notice, but we're happy that we were able to go live and everything on this fine Saturday afternoon. Hopefully this video will be recorded and then uploaded afterwards to both Facebook and our YouTube. For those of you that aren't familiar, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, the one that we'll be using, is a tabletop role-playing game that is published by Wizards of the Coast. It is a very popular game in, well, not just the game shops, but actually in the virtual space, especially since the pandemic has started. Most players have migrated to playing online, which has made it super convenient to use. And so I'll be running you all through a super quick, really simple method to making your characters. We'll be using D&D Beyond. So if you go to dndbeyond.com, and actually I'll go ahead and show you all what the page looks like, you can start to create your own character that way. There are many methods for character creation. You can see here that there's the standard, quick build, randomize, as far as D&D Beyond is concerned. But for building a character, D&D Beyond does an excellent way of guiding you through it step by step on how to do so. And I'll also be showing you that there are character sheets available for free for those of you that decide to play in person rather than online. On the official dnd.wizards.com website, there are character sheets that are available for free to download, print, and use whenever you see fit. See that there are the 5th edition character sheets are probably what you'll be using if you are deciding to opt for using a physical sheet. But back to D&D Beyond. So to give you sort of the basics for designing your very own character, you want to begin by conceptualizing your character. So you want to come into this with an idea for what kind of character you'll be playing in regards to what race is your character. So that could be a dwarf or an elf, or even as out there as like a kobold. Then each of these races kind of have their own unique abilities or unique history or community in the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition settings. And you will also have to figure out what kind of class you'll be playing as you come into this. So whether you want to play Raging Barbarian or a Noble Paladin, you come into your session or your character creation with an idea. Maybe even come in with a description of your character. So what is their name? What is their backstory? What physical traits do they have? What characteristics do they embody? Down to what alignment, as Dungeons & Dragons does have an alignment system, whether it's a true neutral character or a chaotic good, sort of like a Batman character. Well, they'll do good and by any means necessary, or a lawful evil character that abides by certain tenets that aren't particularly good in the eyes of many. And coming in with that idea, you can go ahead and start building your character. I'll go ahead and start from the beginning. You usually want to start by picking the race of your character. So I'm going to run you all through a step-by-step approach that D&D Beyond uses. And we'll go ahead and do standard. I did toggle on the show help text. What D&D Beyond does really well is at every step, it explains what every single item means. So we'll start with the standard character building. Here, they give you just a rundown of what it's like to build a character. You come in, typically building a first level character. As you become a more advanced player or you play often enough, you can build characters just from a higher level to start an adventure off. Whether it's 5th level or 10th level, or somehow all the way up to 20th level, which is the max that a character can be in Dungeons & Dragons. Running through that, D&D Beyond does sort of have every single resource out there, as there is more than just a single book or a single rule set for Dungeons & Dragons. And so you want to typically check in with your DM to see what rules or sources they will be allowing. Seeing as I'll be running this character, I'll just go ahead and toggle on a couple of these and leave the rest blank that I won't be using in my own game. Optional features is there are other rule sets that are published, and D&D, whether you like it or not, is a very extensive rule set. And so what's nice is you can customize which rules you want to use, as this is your game, or you and your friends, as you run through an adventure, you get to pick which rules you like or don't like. So I'll be toggling on a couple of these. And so the optional class feature is, as you level up to certain classes, you can pick between a couple of classes rather than just being given one when you get to a certain level. Advancement type is how your dungeon master is going to level up your character as they progress. Will they just level up when it's a good time in the story? Or will they go ahead and stick to the XP value? You'll gain experience as you disable traps or survive traps, as you defeat certain enemies, or as you roleplay really well throughout your session. I'll just go ahead and stick with that so we can progress here. Hit point type, kind of going in more line with character progression. You can decide whether your character gains their hit points, or how much damage they're able to take before they suffer the consequences there. It is either a fixed amount where every level you get the same amount, or you can manually do it. I know that some dungeon masters, myself included, like to either roll for hit points every level or divvy them out at a set amount. And so the rest of this is more of what you would ask for your dungeon master as you go through progression, or when you're playing, whether ignoring the weight of all the gold that you'll be accumulating on your adventures, or whether you want to be like superheroes where you don't have to manually track the weight of all your items, and so on and so forth. And so I'm just going to progress through this here. So on to the actual character designing, is picking your race. So what's nice about every race is that they are all unique. And so you'll go into this and I'll use the race here in terms of Dungeons and Dragons, the word race. However, other systems choose to represent that in another way. There is another system called Pathfinder that will, instead of saying race, will say ancestry. So it's really a matter of preference in what word you would like to use or what system you're using. But for the sake of Dungeons and Dragons, they use the word race to decide whether you're a human or an elf or a dwarf. But yes, every race in Dungeons and Dragons is unique. They all have these racial traits in regards to the things that make them special, whether that's the ability to breathe underwater, being able to see in pitch black night, or some races even get the ability to fly. And so along the terms of flight, there are other movements or movement types that races get, whether it's burrowing underground, having an innate ability to do that, or being able to have a natural swim speed. And so it differs as you go through the races. You kind of pick which one is in flavor of what you envision this character to be like, or however you picture the abilities that you have as you progress in your character build. They also mention here that age is different for when you're a member of a specific race, when you're considered an adult. So, as an example, elves are very long-lived, so they have a lifespan of up to 750 years. When you compare that to a human who, in Dungeons & Dragons, doesn't normally reach the age of 100, but they can get up to 100 years old. Some races, as they list here, have a tendency towards certain alignments. So if they're more chaotic or lawful or evil or good, this is not really a binding thing. This is more of a preference or a sort of assumption about certain characters as you build them. Different members of races are in specific size categories. In Dungeons and Dragons, most character races are a medium size, which is sort of the default. And so they'll have a movement speed that is about 30 feet or so. Or they're members of smaller races, or they can be between 2 to 4 feet. So that would be your halflings or your gnomes or your goblins. And certain rules of the games affect different size category creatures differently. Mostly with that, the one that's most important to remember is that small creatures tend to have a trouble wielding heavier weapons. But like almost anything in the game, you can find a way to get around that if you have a specific concept in mind. As it states here, by virtue of your race, character can speak, read, and write certain languages. So an elf is going to begin speaking Elven, and more than likely Common. Common being the common language of the people of Eberron, the setting for Dungeons and Dragons. And when you pick a race, there might be certain ones that ask you to pick a sub-race. So members of sub-races have all the racial traits or the special things that make that race unique that match their parent race. However, you might also have, for example, with dwarves, they can be hill dwarves or mountain dwarves. And whichever one of those you pick, it might have a difference in your appearance, or you might have additional racial traits, or one of the other things that races provide you is a bonus to a 6 set of numbers known as your ability scores. And so a sub-race might have a bonus in one and a negative in the other, and vice versa. As I mentioned, those ability scores, that's a set of 6 numbers that determine how good your character is at certain abilities or attacks or spellcasting. So that is something you would have to keep in mind as you build your character, is that your race will affect what bonuses you get to certain ability scores. And progressing on from here, I'm going to go ahead and D&D Beyond will let me pick which race I would like to play. For my example, I'm going to go ahead and stick with the dwarf, as I had talked about it. And you can see here that in picking dwarf, there are 4 sub-races. I'm going to go ahead and stick with the hill dwarf. D&D Beyond does do a good job at breaking down what each race and sub-race give you. They give you a small little excerpt just kind of explaining what this particular race is good at. The racial traits for the dwarf are a +2 to Constitution, being one of the 6 scores that we have to decide what to prefer over the other in terms of what character idea we have. Dark vision, so them being accustomed to life underground, they have superior vision in dark and dim conditions. Dwarven resilience being something that they have in regards to protecting themselves against poison or resisting damage from poison. And then dwarven combat training, they would have proficiency, or they are a lot more capable or adept at wielding battle axes, hand axes, light hammers, and war hammers. A lot of races will also give you a proficiency, or again, an advantage, a boon in a specific tool. And so here you see the dwarf can pick between smith's tools, brewer's supplies, or mason's tools. And so there's a couple of things here. The dwarven toughness, they gain more hit points as they level up. Stone cunning is whenever they are doing a check on stonework. They are a lot more capable of that. And so I'm just going to go ahead and hit choose race for the dwarf. And what D&D Beyond will kind of let you pick here, and something that you will pick as you go on, is that we had some options when we were looking at racial traits. We didn't get everything listed there. For tool proficiency, we had to pick a specific set of tools. So I'm going to go ahead and go with the smith's tools for this character. And to explain proficiency, as you'll see that word pop up often throughout 5th edition, is if the proficiency is a bonus that you can apply to a specific skill or certain attacks, spell casting, whatever your character has. If it asks for proficiency, it is a set number that you get that grows with you as you level up your character. And so proficiency here, meaning that if I were to use smith's tools in comparison to another set of tools, like an artisan, then my proficiency would apply to my smith's tools usage, not particularly to the artisan tools usage. So it's just a set number that grows with you that you can apply to anything that says you have proficiency in. And so moving on from the hill dwarf, I'm content with what I picked there. Everything else is something that I will already be getting. These are racial traits. And move on to the class section. So the classes are, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, very unique in their own right, where if you pick one class, it differs greatly from another. So this would be like if you choose to be a wizard. A wizard has arcane casting that a ranger necessarily wouldn't have. Rangers being more of a class that deals with martial or like physical fighting, and melee being up front or ranged. And the way that they're played is completely different than the way you would play a wizard or a cleric if you wanted to be a divine healer. And so some players might decide to play multiple classes, as that is an option. But for the sake of our example, I'll move on to the next step and pick one of the listed classes here. Each class has its own flavor, its own set of abilities. And so when you come into character building, you want to at least have some idea for what kind of character you want to play, what role in your party or group of adventurers you would like to fill. So maybe you want to be the healer, so a cleric would be a good fit for that. Maybe you want to be the frontline fighter. You want to be up front, taking all of the hits for your allies, protecting them and dealing the most damage. Then you might want to be up there like a fighter or raging like a barbarian. And so rather than focusing on the arcane, you might want to just be the damage dealer. For the sake of this example, for my dwarf, I'm going to go in and pick a wizard. So this arcane caster that dabbles in magics of all sorts and comes in with a high intelligence, as when you pick a class here, and even if you look at it in the Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook, you'll see that most classes have a recommended primary ability that you want to be focusing your ability scores in, that being one of the 6 numbers that you have when you first build your character. So here we have the wizard, a scholarly magic user capable of manipulating the structures of reality. A couple of words here that you'll see. The hit die, for me, is a d6. So the hit die is what determines how many hit points or health points you will be gaining as you level up. Your primary ability being intelligence, so that's what I will be using for most of my class abilities, so like casting magic. And the saves that you see here is on the character sheets. When you look at them, there are saving throws, or a roll that you would have to roll with a dice, known as saves. There's one save for each ability score, so that would be strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. And so wizards gain proficiency in intelligence and wisdom. So that proficiency bonus I mentioned earlier will be added on to my saves for intelligence and my saves for wisdom. If we scroll down here, you can see that they break down the sort of class abilities or class features that you gain as you level up. So at first level, wizards gain spellcasting. Right off the bat, they start off with a spell book that contains spells that they then know and can cast. And so that breaks it down a little bit more. They gain an ability known as Arcane Recovery, which is when they finish a rest at some point in their day adventuring, they can recover some of those spells that they've already cast. And then we get to second level, where it lists here Arcane Tradition, which you pick a school of magic that you go through and you are more adept at. And so those are broken down as you continue on. And each class does give you a set of proficiencies. So things that you get to apply your proficiency bonus on, or things that you are more capable at in general. So as we said already, there were these saving throws for intelligence and wisdom. Wizards, in terms of armor, have no proficiencies, so they don't get to wield a heavy full plate armor, or even simple lightweight leather armor is not something they are proficient in. So that's going to have some effect on my character sheet, and this varies greatly from if you decided to play a fighter, which are adept in all armor and all weapons, and that's what they focus on. Tools, I gain no more proficiency, so besides the ones that I already got for my racial trait, where I pick the Smith's tools, I have no proficiencies besides that one in terms of tools. And then skills. Skills are as they say, just a certain number of skills that every character can roll on, and those skills would be required to see if you are trying to swim across a gap, jump across a gap, and so then you would roll in acrobatics, sort of thing, in athletics. Or if you were trying to climb a tree, that's when you would use your athletics to see how well you do it, or if you do it at all. For wizards, they have the Arcana, History, Insight, Investigation, Medicine, and Religion, where I can pick 2 that I can become proficient in. That doesn't mean that I can't roll these skills if I don't have proficiency in them, but maybe my particular dwarf wizard is more adept at Arcana or History. And other than the proficiencies, it lists the hit points, so how many hit points you will be gaining every level, which was that hit die, 1d6 per wizard level. And so I'm going to go ahead and add the wizard class. And from there, you see that it, once again, D&D Beyond kind of breaks it all down, listing the hit points that you get at first level, the spellcasting ability that I get at first level, and those proficiencies. You see that it's asking me to pick 2 from the listed proficiencies here that I will gain my proficiency bonus on, from the skills listed here to gain a proficiency bonus on. So as I said earlier, I'm going to pick Arcana, so that is knowledge of just the arcane arts in general, or magic in general. And then my other wizard skill, I will pick History, so sort of have a dwarf that has more knowledge of the past rather than in terms of medicine or religion. And I'm there at first level. I will go ahead and hit, let's go ahead and fix this here. These hit points should not be more than 6 for my first level. Hit apply, and then hit next. And those ability scores that I was talking about, the 6 abilities that you have numbers in, which is your strength, your dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Each ability does have a score, and it is a number that you record and write down when you're building your character, because these numbers basically determine how capable your character is at certain abilities. So strength would be for your melee, or if you're using a skill that is very physically demanding, you would use your strength ability score. For dexterity, that determines how capable you are at dodging hits, or how nimble your character is. Constitution is, as you might have seen earlier, it does actually go with your hit points. And so that determines how many hit points you're going to be gaining as you level up, or how well you are at resisting things that attack your constitution, like a poison. There is intelligence, which in general, how intelligent your character is, how knowledgeable they are at certain skills, and how mentally capable they are to resist psychic effects. Wisdom, you can simply explain it as your experience, or even as street smarts. And so that would be in how wise your character is, at how they can utilize skills that require wisdom, like a medicine. And then there is charisma, which is how socially capable your character is, or you can even make it as simple as how attractive your character might be, either in appearance or in personality. And that's great for your characters that are trying to be very diplomatic. And so when you're trying to generate what your scores are for these 6 skills, there are 3 different ways to do it. There's the standard array, where there's a fixed list of numbers, those being there, the 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8, and you can decide to put those numbers in whichever ability you want. So if you were going for a fighter, you might decide to optimize and pick the 15 for your strength. Your intelligence might not be as important for that fighter. You might put the 8 in intelligence. And so you kind of just take this array of numbers and distribute them how you see fit. There's also the point buy, where maybe you have a better idea for what sort of character you'll be building. And so you might opt in and use a point buy. It is a 27 point buy, and it costs you a certain amount of points from that pool of points to get an ability score up to 14 or 15. And then manual or roll your stats is some people decide to just roll dice to determine what their stats might be. And so this is more of something you would check in with your dungeon master or game master with to see what they prefer, and you would pick that generation method for your ability scores. For the sake of simplicity, I will go ahead and show you what the standard array looks like. In D&D Beyond, they let you determine there from the 3. And so you'll decide, okay, so for a wizard, I'm deciding strength isn't all that important for this wizard. So we'll leave that at 8. And I know that my intelligence is my most important thing, so I'll leave that at 15. And so you'll see here, as you assign these numbers, this will total up everything. So if your race provides a bonus or a penalty, it'll go there. Maybe you have improvements because you're a higher level, that would go in there, and so on. And so your base score is what I just picked, which was that 8. I don't have any penalties or bonuses to strength, and so it will just stay 8. While for my intelligence, it's going to be the same thing. My base score was 15. I didn't have any other bonuses or penalties, so it stays 15. That's why it's kind of important to pick the race before the class, and before you assign ability scores, because you might later on decide, you know what, I didn't need as much intelligence as I chose because my racial bonus gave me some. And so I'm going to go ahead and do one that I know for a fact I do have a bonus in because of my dwarven racial traits. And so I'll go ahead and put a 10 in that one. And you'll see that for the Constitution, it does list my base score is 10, like I chose there. But my racial bonus gives me a +2 to Constitution. And so my total score is going to be 12 for Constitution. I have 3 other scores that I haven't chosen yet, so I'm just going ahead and allotting them as what I think is best for this character. And so my total scores, as I go through these, it's going to be an 8 for strength, so very physically weak character, 12 for dexterity, so above average, average being 10 in terms of how nimble this character is. 12 constitution, so a little hardier than the rest in my constitution. 15 for intelligence, so definitely above average. 15 in wisdom, so that is because I chose a base score of 14, and my racial bonus gives me a +1, making that a 15. And charisma being 13. As I've picked the scores for these ability scores, or these abilities, you'll notice there is this other number underneath known as the modifier. So for every 2 above 10 or every 2 below 10, you add a modifier or you lose a modifier. So the modifier is the main number that you'll be using when you need to roll something for strength or dexterity. And so my modifier is +2 for my intelligence. So anything that's going to require my intelligence, like an attack roll using my magic, I will use that +2 modifier. Go ahead and move on from the ability scores. So here's where we describe our characters a little more. So this character that I have designed and built is a dwarf for the race, a wizard for the class, and so that's already planned out. We are a level 1 dwarven wizard, but the rest of it that makes this character unique, that is the creative aspect of playing a TTRPG or a tabletop role-playing game, is this part, the description. And so here, see, Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition has a mechanic they call background. So you would choose a background that you think is relevant to your character's story. So for this one, I'm going in thinking they are an archaeologist. And so here you will learn an archaeologist learns about the long lost and fallen cultures of the past by studying their remains, their bones, their ruins, their surviving masterworks, and their tombs. And so now I've kind of given a little more fleshed out story for this dwarven wizard, which I'm going to name Volkmar Greybeard. So now we have a Volkmar Greybeard from the clan Greybeard, who is an archaeologist and predominantly studies arcane magic and is trying to practice their archaeology and travel around the world to discover the arcane histories of fallen civilizations. And so in that regard, I've already separated my unique dwarven wizard, comparing him to other dwarven wizards or just other wizards or other dwarves in general. And you'll see that word again, proficiencies, here. So the archaeologist background. And so these backgrounds that you see here, including the archaeologist ones, are ones that are already written by Wizards of the Coast for their Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition game. You can go in if you decide, you know what, I know exactly what my character is and they don't fit in any of this. You can then ask your dungeon master if it's okay to start designing your own background. But for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to stick with the archaeologist. And so we'll see. They start off with proficiencies in survival just for being an archaeologist. So that wisdom is going to come in handy with my survival skill. And I will also get my proficiency bonus in the survival skill. And they are allowing me to pick another skill, and here there is no limit to what skill to be proficient in. The only limitation in this regard is that it can't be a skill that I have already gained proficiency in. So the arcana that I picked and the history I picked for my wizard class are not on here to be chosen. And so we'll go for perception. I want him to be very capable of spotting traps when he's delving deep into dungeons. And tool proficiencies. So as you remember, for my dwarven race, I have proficiencies in smith's tools. And for this one, I can choose between cartographers or navigators. So I'd say he's very well traveled. So he wants to be proficient with cartographer's tools to map out his route. And so playing a dwarf, as I mentioned earlier, each race kind of has a set of languages that they already know. The archaeologist background is going to give me another language to pick from. So you know what, I'll say he's particularly interested in dragons and dragon history. So we'll go with Draconic as a language that my dwarven wizard will start off knowing. As you go along, you might gain more tool proficiencies or more skill proficiencies or even more languages as your character progresses and levels up and plays in their adventure. But starting, we will know Draconic, we will know Dwarven, and Common, like most races start off knowing in terms of Common. Historical knowledge is a feature that I gain just for being an archaeologist. And so this is something that might come in handy when I'm first looking and determining whether a dungeon or ruin I'm entering is a dwarven ruin or even a human ruin. And the last thing that you'll see under for backgrounds are the suggested characteristics. So Dungeons and Dragons makes things a little easier for some people if you can't decide what sort of characteristics you want your character to have. You can either go through this list and pick it, or you can see that they have them numbered here with a D8 or a D6. You can roll a die to determine which characteristics your character will embody. So whether that's I'm happier in a dusty old tomb than in the centers of civilization. So you might have a character who is sort of avoiding larger cities, but is in their element investigating a tomb. So rather than picking, I will be rolling and just randomly. So I did get the I'm happier in a dusty old tomb than I am in the centers of civilization. And it says here choose 2. So I'll go ahead and roll again. And I also get I might fall, but I will never give up as a characteristic. So this is a very resilient character filled with determination as far as personality traits are concerned. And if you're not happy with any of them, you are always capable of writing your own, of choosing your own from another background. Most dungeon masters are very forgiving or willing to let you write this stuff out on your own rather than picking this predetermined amount or these predetermined traits. and an ideal. So an ideal that my character will have, something that I will, when I play this character, be embodying. So I'll go ahead and hit random. Danger. With every great discovery comes great danger. The two walk hand in hand. So this character is sort of this view that anything worth learning or anything worth discovering is going to be dangerous. And so he's going to maybe have a more foolhardy approach to delving into these dungeons. Scrolling down, you see that you'll have bonds. So there are certain attachments that your character will have. And so I'll go ahead and roll on that one. I won't sell an art object or other treasure that has historical significance or is one of a kind. So anything that my dwarf finds on any archaeological digs, he's going to hang on to if they are important or one of a kind. And so that is a bond that I will have. This character might either be, I can play that as very greedy, or someone who just wants to preserve these items rather than sell them. You'd want to put them in a museum. And no character is complete, or I would say as interesting, than without a flaw. Every character should have flaws, and that is a personal preference of mine, is that your character is a flawed being. It makes them a little more relatable or something that you can attach yourself onto. And so I'll roll randomly here. I have no time for friends or family. I spend every waking moment thinking about and preparing for my expedition. So this character is going to have a very hard time making connections with his fellow adventurers or family or friends. And so we're already starting to see this character out a little more, kind of going through Volkmar Greybeard, the dwarven wizard archaeologist. You can see that he has trouble making connections with people, always focusing on his work. He's very attached to the items that he makes, and either he has an attachment to this for the historical significance or because they're unique. And so we have a more fleshed out character than when we started with. And now that we've chosen the characteristics, the ideals, the bonds, and the flaws, our character is able to differentiate a little bit more compared to other dwarven wizards. And then we have the alignment. So the alignment is sort of the boiled down moral compass or ideological compass for your character. And so that can be your chaotic evil, where if you want to associate yourself with demons who have a predisposition to violence, are spurred by greed, bloodlust, or if you want to go the complete opposite end of that, we have the lawful good creatures. They're counted on to do the right thing as expected by society. So paladins are lawful good. Certain dragons are lawful good. And so this is more of a, if you really want to get down to the nitty gritty of your character as a whole, and I picture this character to not really be one that abides by societal laws just because he's a good character. I also don't see him just being naturally evil. I see this character very much in the center, tries to steer clear of morality, doesn't take sides. His focus is on just historical preservation, or his focus is just in his work. He doesn't care about anything else. So we'll do true neutral, smack dab in the middle. If my character worshipped a particular deity or a set of gods or had specific ideals, had any faith, I would put it in here. But seeing as this character is so cerebral, so focused on just the history, I don't have a faith for him. And lifestyle is what sort of life this character is living, in the quality of their lifestyle. So starting with wretched, living in inhumane conditions, no place to call home, they shelter where they can. And so this is a very difficult lifestyle for this character. And it can go all the way up to aristocratic, where you're living in the lap of luxury. And so we'll say he's had some good luck with his archaeological finds. So he lives a modest life, travels from inn to inn, isn't particularly hungry or thirsty. He's always living in clean conditions. Very ordinary sort of life. After that, after everything, we have the physical characteristics, which is what sort of hair color do you expect them to have, or how long is their hair, what texture, and so on. And so we'll say curly brown hair, about shoulder length. We'll say kept tied up. So skin color, we'll say tan skin, clear complexion for this character. Eyes. Heterochromatic. So let's say he's got 2 different colored eyes. We'll kind of differentiate him there a little bit more. Blue and green. Being a dwarf, we'll say he's not particularly tall. For a dwarf, we'll put him about 4 foot. Let's do 4'8" for our dwarf. He's not particularly strong, so he probably wouldn't be heavy and with rippling muscles. But we'll put him about, I know the dwarves are particularly stocky, so 200 pounds there. And age, so he's a little older of a dwarf. And so dwarves, they live, let's go ahead and actually look that up here just to make sure we're correct on it. But I believe dwarves live up to be about 400 years old. Just double checking that here. No, sorry, they live up to be on average about 350 years. So I'm going to make my dwarf a little older. So he's 200 years old. And gender, as I have been saying, I'm just going to go ahead and put down his pronouns in place for his gender and say he identifies as he, him. And we'll progress onward to the sort of final thing as you're designing your character is your starting equipment. So your character as an adventurer or as a student, as an archaeologist, what equipment do they already have on hand? And so choosing equipment, what's nice is D&D Beyond makes it really simple in how to pick your equipment, but when you're building your characters, each class and background might have a set of items they already provide to you, and so you can decide to just take that equipment as is. However, if you decide, you know what, I don't think any of that stuff fits for me, I don't particularly need a bedroll, I'm going to be sleeping in trees, then you can just opt in and take the gold and buy the items that you think you need. But I'm going to just say that Volkmar here is just going to start with the standard wizard and archaeologist equipment. So I'm going to start him off with a quarterstaff. And so he'll use it as a walking stick in his little more advanced age. A component pouch or an arcane focus. So for wizards, how they cast their spells is either they use certain components like firefly thorax compared to a panda lily flower, whatever it might be. But I'm going to start off with a component pouch rather than an arcane focus. An arcane focus is usually just a magical crystal that you hone your magic through. And so component pouch, just because I like the idea of Volkmar gathering supplies for his spells that way. And the Scholar's Pack, when I click it, it tells you it includes a backpack, a book of lore, and you can determine what lore that might be, a bottle of ink, an ink pen, 10 sheets of parchment, a little bag of sand, and a small knife. So very much a Scholar's Pack, perfect for someone who's been, maybe living in a town. Volkmar, however, is more of an explorer, and we'll go to the Explorer's Pack where it has a bedroll. So he'll sleep outside if he needs to. A mess kit, so your pots and pans, your knife and fork, perfect for travel. Tinderbox to light your own torches and your own campfires. Torches, rations for the days that it takes him a while to get from town to town. Water skin, as well as 50 feet of rope strapped to the side of it. So it's a little more on brand for what I picture for Volkmar as a traveling archaeologist. And of course, no wizard is complete without a spellbook. And so he starts off with a spellbook. Then we get onto the archaeologist equipment. There's a wooden case that has a map to a ruin or dungeon, so maybe his next archaeological dig, he already has a map containing, or a map inside this wooden case. A lantern, a miner's pick. Being a dwarf, he's probably accustomed to those, and so he'll carry that with him in case he needs to clear some rubble to get deeper into a ruin. Set of traveler's clothes, a stout set of clothing, just that he can just mend when he needs to. A shovel, a 2-person tent, and this is here a trinket recovered from a dig site. So the archaeologist background, I apologize, it allows me to have a trinket, just more so something that I think he would be attached to. Maybe one of those things that he wouldn't sell that we mentioned before on his ideals. And a pouch containing 25 gold pieces. So I have a little extra spending money just for being an archaeologist. And so we'll hit add starting equipment. And with that, seeing as we're a level 1 character, our inventory is all here, but we don't really need or have anything else. In total, the amount of weight that Volkmar is carrying is 109 pounds, where if we were playing with the encumbrance rules that I mentioned way in the beginning, that would be relevant, but I toggle those off just to kind of keep the heroes moving. I don't want to bog down my players with maintaining how much weight they're capable of holding and how much they have. So we'll hit next. And so with that, all complete, Volkmar's basically done. So we can take a look at the character sheet for Volkmar and kind of go through what all of that means. And so this character sheet, it's identical in some aspects, but different in others when comparing it to the physical sheets that you will see for characters. The physical sheets are laid out in a similar way, but the main stuff to go through as kind of look at this character sheet here, we have Volkmar's name up here. And so I put he, him in terms of gender for Volkmar. He's a Hill Dwarf Wizard 1, level 1. And so you see his strength here being 8. His modifier is 1. So if I ever need to roll anything, I'll just kind of click that. D&D Beyond does a fun thing where they will let you click on something and it rolls the die there for you. So you see on a strength check where if I had to move a boulder really quick to get it out of my way, I can do a strength check. And in total, 2 is what I rolled, plus my -1 modifier. I only rolled a 1, so Volkmar would have struggled to push that boulder to the side. Underneath that, you see these saving throws, where the ones that are toggled on are ones that we have proficiency in. So intelligence saving throw, say an enemy was trying to possess my mind, and I needed to resist that. So my dungeon master would ask me for an intelligence saving throw. So I would just click on that. And so Volkmar rolled a 9, adding the 4 from the saving throw. That garners me a 13. So depending on how powerful that enemy is, that 13 that I rolled would be a pass or a save. And advantage against poison. So if it was a poison effect, then I would roll twice is what advantage means. And disadvantage means you roll twice as well. But with advantage, you take the higher number that you rolled. Disadvantage, you take the lower number that you rolled. And you can see the skills here, the proficiencies and all that there. My proficiency should actually be here on my character sheet. Oh, no, there it is. There it is. The proficiency bonus is that anything that has toggled on like that proficiency gets an additional +2. So my Arcana normally would only be a +2 because my intelligence, as you can see here, my intelligence modifier is only 2. But because it had proficiency in it, it's 2 higher. And so rolling an Arcana, let's say I was investigating some spell that was being cast, and I rolled a 16. So Volkmar is doing a lot better with the Arcana than he is with the Strength. But yeah, that is your quick rundown of the character sheet. The only other things to kind of sort of share with you are the initiative bonus. So Volkmar only has a +1, where if we got into a combat and I needed to see how quick Volkmar was to act, I would roll my initiative. And depending on how high I rolled, Volkmar not rolling very well today, it's 1 that I rolled and then the +1 that I have as a bonus. And so I would have a 2. So That's a fairly low initiative roll, and Volkmar might be one of the last people to go in combat. And then there's the armor class, which is if there's an enemy that is swinging at Volkmar, let's say a giant comes in and is swinging a club at Volkmar, whatever they roll for their attack, they would have to beat my 11. If they beat the 11, then they do hit Volkmar. And so that is just a quick run through of the character sheets of what it looks like once you have finally built your characters out, at least how it looks like on D&D Beyond. If you were to follow along with the character building on a physical character sheet, most of the stuff should be the same. You would just have to refer to either books or online resources that kind of list out what everything is, like the classes and everything. The only other thing on this character sheet that I didn't quite cover are spells, but some classes get spells and they would be listed on your character sheet as ones that you can cast out. They use your proficiency bonus to hit for certain things, like your spell attacks. That'd be proficiency bonus plus intelligence for my wizard. I'd have a +4 on my spells to attack. But that's basically a quick run through for D&D Beyond, as well as just a general run through of character design. And so hopefully some of you were able to follow along in this really rapid fire step-by-step builds of a D&D 5th edition character. Depending on what system you're playing, the rules might be slightly different, but for the most part, a lot of tabletop RPGs run the same in planning out a character. You come in with an idea, you would pick your race if they have that, or ancestry, and you would also pick out your class. But other than that, thank you all for joining me for this very quick run through of D&D 5th edition character building. If you have any other questions at all, please feel free to reach us here at the Tulare County Library. My name is Jose. I will be the dungeon master for the future games that we'll be running here. In the chat there, we'll be linking D&D Beyond, as well as the events that we have planned for Dungeons and Dragons. Keep an eye out for the video that we'll be posting, going through a little more in depth about what character sheets look like, how they work, and what a typical D&D session might look like. Also, we will be linking very soon the events for sessions that we'll be running for Dungeons and Dragons. We'll be having 4 live sessions, or at least virtual live sessions for players that can sign up. This is limited to players ages 12 to 17, and there is a limited number of slots, but hopefully you manage to save your spot for one of those sessions. Again, this has been Jose from the Tulare County Library. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I wish you all a wonderful weekend and a happy Father's Day weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.